Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to welcome everyone to our Strategy, Policy and Finance meeting this morning. And nau mai, haere mai to all those who are watching online. And I'll just also like to welcome, we have a large contingency from the Regional Council here today. And I am going to name you all because it's a very significant bylaw that we're going to be dealing with this morning. And we have from the Regional Council Stephen Lamb, Karen Purcell, Marion Hexton, James Scarf, who's the Senior Public Health Analyst from Rotorua. Welcome, James. Dr. Jim Miller, Medical Officer of Health. Good morning, Mr. Miller. Sandra Barnes, the Economist from Bay of Plenty Regional Council. We have Marianne McLeod, the Chief Executive, and Stuart Burns from the Lakes District Health Board. We also have some apologies from that group, and I'll deal with those now. Apologies from Dr. Johan Moreau, Lakes District Health Board, and apologies from Councillor Tahana, Dr. Phil Shumack, and Dr. Neil DeWitt, and 2 regional councillors. Thank you. Oh yes, of course. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, I was probably going to acknowledge Councillor Thurston and Councillor Winters when they came up to the table, so thank you for that reminder. They weren't on my list. So I'll now call for apologies for this meeting. I have 2 already, from Councillor Rokawa Tate and Councillor Tapsell. Are there any? Thank you, Councillor Sturt. Thank you, Councillor Gould.
Mr. Berryman Kemp, I understand, is an apology as well.
An apology as well. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. All right, those have been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes.
Chair, it's not a declaration of interest, but I'm sure with Marianne being here, we understand there's been a change at Regional Council with who's leading the geothermal work stream now. And is that person in the room? I don't think we've ever met. Who is leading your geothermal work stream? That's good. Thanks, Stephen. Yep.
Thank you, because that is part of the issues we're looking at for heating. Okay, so there are no declarations of interest. Thank you. Page 6, confirmation of minutes. That the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee hearing held on the 13th of July 2017 be confirmed as true and correct. Are there any amendments to that? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just matters arising out of that submissions with regard to the announcement this morning in the paper from Simon Bridges, which is the intention to invest in regional geothermal heating. Shows a willingness for all parties to get on with the job, and I'd like to say that that is a very good outcome with regard to Hannah and Tristan's McDonald's submission with regard to geothermal heating in Rotorua, and the ease in which it can be accomplished if we so wish to pursue it. And remembering that the carbon imprint of geothermal heating is absolutely nil compared to every other prospect.
These are just the minutes we're passing at this point. I will give you an opportunity to discuss that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
When we get into the body of the meeting. So I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes. And okay. Okay, so that's a correction that Councillor Sturt was an apology for those minutes. Now, a mover and a seconder. Councillor Gould, Councillor Donaldson, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to staff reports on page 17. And this is the recommendation, Rotorua Air Quality Control Bylaw, summary and analysis of submissions. So first of all, I'd like to move that the report Rotorua Air Quality Control Bylaw summary and analysis of submissions be received. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Mayor Chadwick. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, we're going to have a presentation from the Regional Council, and following their presentation, there will be questions. And then when we do finally get to the recommendations, I will be taking them one at a time. And I will limit the questions and the discussion specifically to those recommendations. So if you stray accidentally, I'll hopefully try and pull you back in line so that we can actually deal with them one at a time. Okay, thank you. Now, would the Regional Council please like to come and join us and begin your presentation? If I suggest that you borrow some of the microphones on the desks where there are no people sitting at the moment, because then that will make it a lot easier for you. Yes.
While they're getting seated and organised, I do take, I understand where Councillor Bentley was coming from with the matters arising. I'm not sure what it's wonderful that there's going to be some funding that looks at it, but is it a feasibility study? And none of us are quite sure, because that was one of it's not a recommendation, but it was one of our considerations very dear to our heart about looking at the use of geothermal distributive heating here in Rotorua. So is there anyone that can give clarification about what that money is to be spent on?
I'm sorry, Marianne, would you mind coming and using a microphone? It's just that otherwise we have very large blanks in our recording. Thank you.
No, at this stage there isn't. I was actually just querying Stephen around that same matter to see if we had any clarification around the Minister's intent with that funding. So we'll obviously be following up and working with Rotorua Lakes Council as to what that happens to be.
Thank you.
Please do use your microphones. They will cut out if you haven't spoken for a while, so each time you do go to speak, just check that they are on. And just a reminder to everyone, if you could please turn your cell phones off too. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification. I'm a bit in the dark in terms of what the Minister's announced. I wonder if staff could obtain a copy so we could all have a look at it, because if it's going to be discussed, or there's an opportunity to add to the recommendations that we pursue that, I think we should take that opportunity today while we've got our kith and kin here today who will be driving that from an environmental point of view. So I just wondered if we could get a copy of it each. Thanks.
I think a copy is good because I haven't seen it yet, and it's on the way. Okay, and we'll have an opportunity. We'll try not to get sidelined by that until we have all had an opportunity to take a break and actually read it and understand it in detail, and it will again only be for discussion at this point. Thank you. Now, in your hands, who's leading off here? Thank you, Councillor.
I rangatira mai, kui mai, koro mai, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Nō reira I māti a tatau I whakakaha I manake, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Councillor Sturt, you did summarise it perfectly. We are your kith and kin, and we're delighted to be here today, and I promise not to ramble or drift or whatever, Madam Chair. But you've covered all those present here today as part of your introduction, Madam Chair, and so I won't go through them all, but up here to do the presentation and to answer all your questions is Dr. Jim Miller, who's representing Dr. Phil Schumack, who's overseas, one of our medical officers of health. We've got Marianne Henton, who will answer a lot of your questions and queries, and Karen Parcell, who's our senior policy analyst, and leading the team is Stephen, of course, who's well known to you, who's our manager of natural resources policy at the Regional Council. My comments are very brief, but I just need to say that this is a partnership. It's been ongoing for some time, and we really do greatly value the collaboration that's been going on with the Rotorua Lakes Council. I personally, and I know Councillor Winters and Councillor Tahana also subscribe to the view that we need to maintain a very strong partnership and a joint approach to this, and at the end of the day we need rules. There is a limit, as we know, to what you can do in the non-regulatory sector, and I think we've exhausted communication, education and incentives. So I think now the rubber is, I dare I say, is hitting the road, and so our team have got a presentation to update you as our partners on where the bylaw is at the moment, how it's progressing, and they're happy to answer any questions. And also there's members in the gallery here today too who are highly skilled, like James Scarf, who can also answer a lot of your questions and queries. But thank you for having us. It's delightful to be here today. And as I say, we view you as critical partners in this whole exercise. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston.
Tēnā koutou, councillors. Thank you once again for the opportunity to be here to present on this. I think you've heard me talk very positively about the bylaw in the past as part of the program. The program spans regulation and incentives. We are working together on this, and whilst the regional council is here at the front and our logo's on the screen, we have been working with your staff as well. So Rosemary and JP have been part of this process about getting this to where it is today. This is what we're going to do is walk through a number of, shall we call them, well, a little bit of background and some progress on how the whole program's tracking as a lead into some general responses to some of the submission points. There's a lot of community-held views, and we just want to tease those out a bit further to set the scene for moving to the actual bylaw itself. And then in the bylaw there's options, and we'll talk those through, and Karen can go through the detail of what those mean. So if I can just do the quick introduction, and then I'll pass across to Marion to do some stuff around the progress. So just so you know, this is a quick recap in two images of what the issue is. First it's smoky fires, and the second is there's a caldera with an airshed in it. So this is where we're focusing. I think we discussed last time that the airshed has been expanded to pick up the growth areas that Rotorua Lakes Council is looking at in terms of its district plan. So this is the old airshed slightly expanding, and that gets gazetted formally. In terms of the history, we collectively started this process back in 2008. The action plan incentives were kicked off, and that came through various streams of incentives of various types. And then in 2010, we spent a lot of time together working up the initial bylaw, which was adopted in 2010. And ever since that point, progress has been made, particularly around the point of sale upgrade rules. I always call them the quiet achiever, but Marion will talk a little bit more about the numbers that go along with that. In terms of where we're making progress, and there was one of the comments in the submission was that the air quality is improving on its own accord. Of course, the answer is no. The air quality is improving because of what we are doing collectively. So this is the next two slides are around, and you'll have seen them before. These are the updated versions. So this is the concentration of PM10 in the atmosphere. So effectively, what this says is this the highest concentration. When all the concentrations are below 50, we've achieved our target effectively. You're allowed one exceedance per year, but in a sense, 50 is what we're aiming for. So as you can see, there is a difference being made in this community. For every non-compliant fire that's taken out, a difference is made. So this is the concentration. I always like to look more at this slide rather than the next one, which is the exceedances. The exceedances is what we report on under the NES. It's the community expression of what we're trying to achieve. The difference between the two, though, is that you can have a lot of exceedances which are just above the limit, and you'd say, well, we had 100 exceedances, but I'd say, well, we've dropped the concentration right down, we're almost achieving it. So exceedances don't tell you the best picture, concentration does. But put these two together, both of them have the line sloping down. So we are making progress. So in terms of the numbers, I'll just get Marion to run through this and explain this fairly detailed slide.
So these numbers, the top table, comes from your Rotorua Lakes Council consent information. So every year I get the building consent information, the numbers, I run it through and determine if any are duplications of the same property. 62 of those, you'll see down the bottom, replacement consents for compliant solid fuel burners. So they still only have one fire in the property, so we have to do a little bit of evaluation so that we're not double counting. And then the bottom table there is zero emission appliances that we are aware of through various incentive schemes that we've done. So those incentive schemes require you to take out a solid fuel burner and we replace it with a zero emission appliance. So all up, we have 4785 numbers that we have converted solid fuel burners to cleaner emission appliances, which leads us on to this next slide here. So the target that we're after is converting, out of the 8,500 initial wood burners that we had in the airshed, our modelling said if we convert 7,650, we will meet the national environmental standards for air quality. We've done the 4785, but the thing with that 4785 is that what we don't know is how many of those building consents, solid fuel burner upgrades, were new fires going into properties that didn't have an existing fire. So we are unable at this point to say whether it's a new fire going into a home that didn't have a fire or whether it's a replacement fire, like for like. But we've done about 62% of those. The other thing that ticks along very nicely for us is the existing point of sale bylaw, and this is a great rule and it is just working nicely, and these are the numbers since it was introduced, and we average now about 200 non-compliant solid fuel burners are removed every year just through the property sales that turns over. So we've done 732 to date, which is fabulous. One of the other rules in the existing bylaw, and we're not proposing any changes to this, is the indoor open fire ban. So it was estimated that there were 850 indoor open fires in the Rotorua urban airshed, and the majority of people do not use those wood burners anymore, and so that has removed an incredible amount of emissions from the airshed. So the report that you have before you today has been through a group called the Rotorua Air Quality Working Party, which has representatives from Rotorua Lakes Council, the Medical Officer of Health, Housing New Zealand, Plenty Regional Council, and the Ministry of the Environment are just there as an observer capacity. So, and the purpose of that group is that we take a collective approach to air quality to improve the health of the Rotorua community, and it's worked very, very well. So I'll hand over to Karen now, but I just want you to know that the Air Quality Working Party have seen this report, they have discussed this report, and they have endorsed what you are seeing today.
How long is the presentation, and would it be better to have questions at each point? I'll actually...
Chris, can you take questions throughout?
You can take questions throughout? Okay, because I know how sometimes that does interrupt the flow. So yes, you're welcome.
Thank you for that, Marion. If we can just go back to the slide that's talked about the number of burners. Back. Yes, there. There's a gap in 2016-17 about the eco-energy options in the top box. That scheme is still working, isn't it?
Yes, I can explain that. So you'll see that the eco-energy options was a special incentive program that we ran for 4 years where we were replacing, we'd go into the properties and we removed the solid fuel burner, we replaced it generally with another wood burner, compliant wood burner, and we insulated their homes. So that wasn't the Warm Up Healthy Homes program. We just worked collaboratively with ECA and Energy Options, who did the work for us. We've done 2 schemes with ECA. We have worked You'll see down in the zero emission appliances table,
Yeah.
we also, that was working in co-partnering with the Warm Up New Zealand Healthy Homes program, where those 92 zero emission appliances were installed. And yes, the insulation program is still working with ECA. And so for that, the Regional Council is still partnering in that if you had a landlord who wanted to insulate their property, they can get 50% subsidy if they have community service card holder tenants, and the landlord can put the balance of the 50% onto a hot swap loan. So
Great.
that's, yes.
Great, thank you.
See if there are any other questions on this particular slide before we move on. Okay. Okay. No, if there's no further questions, please continue.
Thank you. I'll just give a quick update on where we were when we looked at options for this bylaw. There were three options presented to both councils and the working party. One was to retain the bylaw as it is, where we felt we'd lose an opportunity to resolve any conflict with the regional rules. The second one was to mirror the bylaw to the rules to keep consistency with the regional rules, and the final one was to amend it to ensure the rules in the bylaw were consistent, and all parties agreed to go with option 3, which was to amend it to keep it consistent. So the key changes here, the point of sale rule. Previously, any solar fuel burner had to be removed or made inoperable at point of sale. Previously, we were allowing them to be replaced with another solar fuel burner. Now that indoor open fires have been illegal for 2 years, we've put in that they must be inoperable at the point of sale and not replaced with a new burner. The big change was to the new burner rule. We put in new burners will be limited to pellet burners. Otherwise, burners can only replace existing burners. We also put down the emission limit for burners. This bylaw was introduced in 2010 based on burner technology in 2005. So it's moved on since then, and the best burners are now much lower emission rate. So we recommended to move to the 0.5 grams per kilogram. Oh, yes, I'll get to that. Yes. So that was the original amendment that again was endorsed by the Working Party, this council and the Regional Council. So the summary of submissions, of course, it ran from the 26th of May to the 30th of June. We received 28. In comparison, the bylaw previously in 2010 received 90 submissions, so it was a dramatic drop. But basically, it was in opposition, the point of sale rule, about 18 in opposition of both. Support changed slightly, point of sale rule 6 and 7, and of course some were not stated. So the hearing was held on the 13th of July, as you know. So since then we have been looking at those submissions and seeing how we can resolve many of the issues in it. Of course summarised in your paper today. And what we noticed through reading the submissions and through sitting at the hearing is that there are a number of commonly held views which are not necessarily accurate. So we thought we'd address those up front to try and dispel some of the myths, if you like. The first one is that there's easy access to free and cheap firewood. Now, I'm certain this was probably true many years ago. However, in 2005, even back then when we did our home heating survey, 2/3 of people said they bought their firewood, only 1/3 collected, which we were actually surprised. We expected it to be much higher self-collect. However, since 2005, sawmills have closed. I know that some people had access to free firewood from sawmills. 2 of those have closed, and the entry to forest has now been prohibited. It's now illegal to enter the forest. So when people are reporting that they're going out into the forest to collect their firewood, that they're behaving illegally. So we're not convinced that that is true anymore, and we believe that people are now buying their firewood. Personal experience from Marion, actually going out into low-income homes in this airshed, she says that most people buy their wood. So we have seen it firsthand. There were also a lot of reports that other councils are now letting in new burners. Now, Environment Canterbury and Nelson City Council are often quoted as this. So I had a chat to the staff from those councils. Canterbury, of course, have had to adapt the Air Quality program to ensure overall well-being of their residents following the earthquakes. So comparing our programs with theirs, they now have different priorities. Nelson has actually 4 air sheds. Many people quote they only have 1 air shed. They have 4 air sheds. They are letting a limited amount, very carefully modelled, of burners into some of those air sheds. However, their worst air shed, Nelson Air Shed A, they are absolutely not letting any new burners in at all. So they still have their very strict rules that have been in place since 2006. There was also basically stated that there were no small burners on the Ministry for the Environment's approved wood burner list, so that is at 0.5 grams per kilogram. This was inaccurate. We went through and did a count. There were 11 small burners, and 2 of those offered a wet bag option. We did look at that in more detail, which I'll get to. There's also one that says burners are more cost effective than heat pumps. In an insulated house, now in an uninsulated house, there's a number of issues there. It's going to be inefficiently heated no matter what appliance you have. However, in an insulated house that buys their wood, they are in fact better off with a heat pump. And Consumer New Zealand have, year after year, they come out with this result when they do these analyses. So we had a look at that as well. Also, Stephen touched upon this, air quality is improving on its own. I think there were at least 2 submitters who stated that it's improving, therefore we don't need to do anything. Of course, the improvements are due to the actions of these councils. Finally, sorry, the next one is, there's quite a lot of these. The education on burner use and dry wood is stated as that will solve the problem. That is the panacea, that is the silver bullet, it will solve it. There is evidence that's showing that education has little to no effect. There was a detailed study done in Australia comparing towns that had just education with towns that they went in and educated and removed their burners, and the education had no effect. The towns where they removed the burners had the greatest improvement in health. Dry wood is better, let's be honest, but the old burners are the key problem in an airshed with a large number of old burners, which is why we focus very much on those. And the final, this is a biggie, is that a more stringent bylaw will cause fuel poverty. Overall, and I'm going to go into this in much more detail with the options, the bylaw still allows for replacement burners. Those who are relying on free firewood or their burners may continue to do so, and we will support them to replace those burners. Households without a burner and with fuel poverty are actually unlikely to install a burner. If you are low socioeconomic and you cannot install a burner, it doesn't matter how much free firewood you have, you will probably not be able to afford $5,000 without financial support, and of course we only support replacement burners, not new burners. And there is of course coming up a national focus on improving the heating in rental properties. So for those concerned with poor heating in rental properties, help is coming.
Is it worthwhile just to pause? I mean, do people have questions on these? There are some quite important issues or community issues in here. You heard them through the submission process. We're not trying to shoot them down. We're just trying to say that's our response and our view of what's going on.
Councillor Steve.
Yeah, I'd have to say one of the aspects of the figures, and it's not your problem, is that we've had a government over the last 9 years who've bleated that every Housing Corp New Zealand home has either been insulated and or more efficient heating. And there's over 1,500 Housing Corp homes in Rotorua, and by your figures there's only 333. So how proactive are we going to be with a government agency where they're not even complying with it? So, you know, and you're right about the lower socioeconomic areas. So that's one question.
Through you, Madam Chair, should I answer that? So that's why it is fantastic having Housing New Zealand in the Rotorua Air Quality Working Party. So they sit around at the table with us, and we have been working with them. Not all of those homes have solid fuel burners, but they are systematically working through, and they have now, just at the last meeting, they have identified which homes still have non-compliant wood burners, which homes have compliant burners, and which homes have heat pumps. So we're working quite closely with them, and it's been very successful.
No, my rest of mine is for the... In terms of cheap firewood, my experience, Madam Chair, is that most of the cheap firewood is consumed outside the airshed. In the rural areas, Nongata, Rotorua. However, there are 2 loads of firewood a year commercially cost about $1,200. So there's the case against a heat pump. A heat pump could possibly cost you $400 a month. But the other thing is, how are we going to control the offside road, the other ones that are the hawkers that are selling the wet firewood? I mean, I saw one just recently last Thursday selling firewood off the back of the truck and it was pouring with rain. So, I mean, whether that wood is going to be used in the airshed or not, to me is irrelevant. The opportunity is there for people to still buy cheap firewood.
So, Stuart, I think that's probably a little out of the questions for the regional councillors to ask on how they're going to control the
I'm only
firewood.
referring to their cheap firewood claims.
Firewood sales. I think we may leave that for the discussion.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I have some clarity, please, as to whether we're talking 0.6 or 0.5, because we seem to have different numbers on slides and in our documentation in front of us. And secondly, my question is, where did they come up with a target figure 1/3 of the National Environmental Standard, and is this just a figure that's been plucked out of the blue? Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I am getting to the 0.6. And why it's changed from 0.5 to 0.6. We certainly did not pluck this out of the blue. It is an ongoing trend of design and manufacture of wood burners to be steadily getting better. So it started with 1.5. Environment Canterbury, for example, went with 1.0. Otago went with 0.7. And it's all in a drive to make them cleaner. Now, we were initially concerned that it made no difference in real life. Whatever it was tested at in the laboratory, it was all the same in real life. We have tested that. We have a wood burner expert look at that, and he confirms that, in fact, the lower the emission rate in the lab, the lower the emission rate in real life. So we are confident that the lower the emission rate to a certain point, the better the burner in real life, which is why we've gone with, well, there's another reason why we went with 0.6, which I will get to.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson. You, okay, Councillor Gould and then Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your slide on the point of sale, people in opposition of 18, and the burner rule with people in the opposition of 18, were those the same 18 people? And the second question is, with such a low turnout of people who put in submissions, would you expect the submission rate to be a lot higher, as we've got probably close to over 800 people using burners in Rotorua?
I can't answer whether or not they were the same people. Most likely, I think the 18 and the 18 were the same people, and it slightly differed between the two. Some people supported the point of sale, did not support the new burner rule, but most people, if they were in opposition, they were in opposition to the whole thing.
Submissions normally expect a lot more people to submit, and yet in this case you haven't got many.
I don't know why. My suspicion would be maybe the bylaw has been in place for a number of years. People are accustomed to it. They're complying with it. They're just used to it. So when it was initially introduced, this was the first time that people in this community had any type of restriction on wood burners, which of course creates an outrage and an outcry. But over the last 7 years, they've possibly become accustomed to it and are seeing the benefits of it and the improved air quality. Yeah. For example, the point of sale rule, yes.
Councillor Bentley.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Look, we spent so much time in the past 4 years I've been involved with council. So much time it's been discussing what type of burners, how dry the wood's got to be, how the cost of the wood. And in Rotorua, we're sitting on a pearl under the ground, which is geothermal, and yet you don't seem to be putting very much energy at all towards utilising that resource. And I dare say you'd said a minute ago, one of you said a minute ago, that you're prepared to fund alternative wood-burning systems, but you don't say we're prepared to fund alternative geothermal systems, or even infrared systems and stuff like that. So why
Is there
don't
a
we start?
question in there, Councillor Bentley?
Yeah. You ready? Why don't you start investigating the geothermal side of it?
So I look after the geothermal program for council, and that's particularly the policy and planning side, but that then spans a number of areas. Geothermal is one of those things where it's, I think, a commonly held frustration between your council, our council and staff. We sit around and we say, surely there must be something we can do here. Surely it must work. I think I've used the analogy before around solar panels. 10 years ago, solar panels didn't pay their way. Currently, they do. Next 5 years, who knows where that goes. To the best of our knowledge, geothermal can't be made to work in a cost-effective manner right now. We're doing some work between the two councils around, both councils have looked at this. We're putting that work together and updating it. That will go back to the Air Quality Working Party and also the Geothermal Working Party as well, to say, has anything shifted? At the point it shifts, then that opens up other avenues for us. So we continuously look at this issue. Infrared heaters is another one. We have looked at those. Marion has investigated those. We're all trying to make them, we're trying to make these things work. But for two reasons. One, if it's cheaper, it's cheaper. And the second reason is, if it's more environmentally sound, well, we should be looking at that as well. So I'd hate you to have the perception that we are not investigating, or we don't care, or that it shouldn't be used. That's certainly not true. We continue to look at this thing to see whether we can make it work. The other, I suppose, frustration around this for staff is that people often throw numbers around. So you had a submitter here saying 10,000 houses heated with a $250,000 basic investment. That's not our experience of these things. So if it was, then that would make a great infrastructure investment for maybe both councils. It would make perfect sense. We do. So I suppose the message is we are looking at this, and if anything changes, you'd be the first to know.
Thank you. And you're right, Stephen, it is an area of continued contention for us, because it is something that we desire and have desired and will continue to desire, using geothermal as a heating source. So thank you for that response. Mayor Chadwick, then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions that perhaps we haven't asked the fundamental question about. When is the National Air Quality Standard being reviewed, and are we jumping the gun? Though I agree with incremental public health change. And the other question is, with the reductions in incidences, have we seen at the same time a proportionate reduction in hospital admissions of children and people living in poorly heated homes with bronchiolitis and, all the winter ills?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'll answer the first one. The National Environmental Standard Amendment is imminent. We have had a letter from the Minister saying it is coming. We've had a number of workshops at the staff level with the Ministry about what we would like to see in it, what we think is a good idea. About the only thing we know with reasonable certainty is that PM 2.5 will be introduced as a standard. But of course it's no guarantee. We have done some figures on whether or not Rotorua would exceed their PM 2.5, and it is most likely. Therefore, the same actions that reduce PM 10 will reduce PM 2.5, so the actions will be the same. It's just a matter of where that limit is. I'm so sorry. Yeah. PM 10 is those that are 10 microns or smaller, and they're inhalable. The PM 2.5s are a lot smaller, so they're 2.5 microns, and they get all the way down to the alveoli of the lungs. So they are generally considered to be the worst pollutant, and of course most of the emissions from a wood burner, from any type of combustion process, is PM 2.5.
The take-home message for us is we're understanding the need for incremental change, but if they're going to be reviewing the National Air Quality Standard, you're really saying that it's going to be even more difficult from what you're hearing?
Possibly. We don't know until we know what the exact standards are.
So then for our community, it is that we have to do what we can do at this point in time.
Yes.
Yeah, and are we reducing hospital admissions?
Well, I think, and this is a question that often comes up when a kind of fairly structural approach has been taken to a health issue. It's pretty clear, I mean, there really is no debate that air pollution causes ill health across a whole range of conditions, and that reducing air pollution will reduce the contribution to that ill health. Now, the kind of things that air pollution causes, cardiovascular diseases, or is a contributor to cardiovascular disease, respiratory diseases, strokes, some cancers. Air pollution is not the only thing that causes that, but it's absolutely clear from the epidemiology that there's a direct relation between your level of air pollution and the contribution that makes to ill health in the community. What you can't really do is start pointing at which person or which person has been helped by that. What you can say over time is if you have high air pollution, you will have a higher background of ill health, some of which will be associated with that air pollution. It's one of those things that has to be tackled at a community level, which is obviously what this discussion's about. Have we seen reductions directly related to that, to reductions in air pollution? I don't think I can answer that question directly. I think that it's quite clear that the World Health Organization position is that air pollution is directly related to ill health, and in a way that you can actually, it's actually directly linked. So the more it comes down, the less the contribution to your ill health. Just wondering whether James is there anything you want to add, James? And, you know, this is something that's been known since the 1950s in the Great Smog of London, that if you have air pollution, and that's quite similar, it was also due to domestic heating, that, you know, it takes some time to deal with it, but deal with it you must.
Because this is complex, and for the public to understand it and think we're moving in the right direction was great with the energy swap, when we could go out and say, my children missed 8 days of school over winter from chest infections, and now we're not seeing that. Have we got those sorts of stories if you can't show a correlation directly with the drop in emissions?
I think a lot of that has to do with the related issues about warm, dry housing. We really are talking largely here about outdoor ambient air pollution. And, you know, obviously the things are linked, but, you know, I think that you can get some of those good news stories, I think, from houses where they've had the heating, you know, an affordable heating source, and also with good insulation. Warm, dry houses quite clearly improve the health of individuals, and there's quite a lot of there's New Zealand evidence to exactly that point. Now, these are related issues, but I understand what you're discussing today is about your air quality, outdoor air quality.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just to point out, to give Councillor Bentley some comfort, because he has championed the infrared heaters, as they are a consideration on page 32 as one of the options for a replacement for a non-compliant at point of sale.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions at this point around the table? No? Okay. Please, Karen, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one issue which was of concern was of the emission rate, and it came back to those numbers, 11 small burners available at 0.5 grams per kilogram. Of course, if you have to install a larger burner, you may be burning more wood, you may be getting too hot, dampening it down, which of course increases emissions. So we looked at that in great detail, went all the way through the authorised wood burner list from the Ministry for the Environment, and counted up the numbers of burners that were available. And we found that there was an increase in the overall numbers if you went to 0.6 grams per kilogram. So there were 19 small options with 11 wetback options, which was a considerable increase, as a lot of people would like wetbacks. And the large options, there were 30 with 16, so about half with a wetback option. So that increase in emission rate does not seriously affect the benefits that we want to see from exchanging. However, it's moving the emission rate in the right direction, so further down. And manufacturers of wood burners are constantly designing better, cleaner wood burners. So it continues to push it without compromising households and their ability to heat their homes. So we recommend a change to 0.6 grams per kilogram for replacement burners. So issue 2 was the biggie. And this caused considerable concern with a number of people. We wanted to make sure that we didn't end up with people in fuel poverty exacerbated by the bylaw. We assessed what we were proposing in the bylaw. We found that fuel poverty wasn't exacerbated, and the risk of creating unheated homes. If they're already unheated, the bylaw doesn't affect them, doesn't improve them, doesn't do anything. However, if they are already heated, it doesn't actually put them at risk. However, it was such considerable concern that we took some options to the working party to consider the likelihood of fuel poverty and the impact when we looked at these options. So you were provided with a summary of options table. We didn't look at any options for the indoor open fire rule, as that was not under contention in submissions or by anybody. However, we did look closely at those points where the point of sale rule and the new burner rule may cause or exacerbate fuel poverty. So I'm going to step through those options as we go through. So option 1 was to do with allowing replacement of indoor open fires at the point of sale rule. Option 1A was the rule as drafted, which was to allow no replacement. We looked at 1B, which was to allow indoor open fire replacement. So we looked at some of the numbers. Basically, the community has been given at least 7 years' notice and financial support and advertising, and we sent letters out to every house in Rotorua that may be affected by this rule to say this is what's coming, this is what's happening. Once indoor open fires were phased out in 2015, the community still had 2 years to replace those indoor open fires at their expense. We consider them to be well and truly gone, and those who are still relying on them are either flouting the law, behaving illegally, or they absolutely have no option. If they absolutely have no option, then we will definitely consider their case and look at, we still have the dispensation allowance in the bylaw, and we can look at good options that will not adversely affect those households. So we expect those numbers to be quite low. So our recommendation to the working party, endorsed by the working party, was to leave the rule as drafted with no replacement of indoor open fires. Non-compliant other burners can be replaced still under that rule. The second one was...
do you want to do questions on each option? Is that easier?
I will open that for questions. Yes, Councillor Sturt.
I'll be supporting that, obviously. The reasons for that I detailed in discussions with Environment Bar Plenty, and thank you for the opportunity to do that. I think it's quite an open door policy, which was really good. I think the problem with 1A is the rentals. In my experience, that is where the problem is. Rentals been on-sold, and landlords trying to abrogate their responsibilities. I think this improvement in the bylaw right through certainly sends a signal that behaviour will not be tolerated. So in terms of the no change, there was a thought, Madam Chair, that they put it on to the purchaser. But as I pointed out to the working party, the purchaser, if they're a first home buyer, which is at the level that we're mainly looking at, the bank, when they lend them the $220,000 to buy the house, don't say, oh, I'll give you $2,000 to do the driveway and $3,000 to do the hot swap, to improve your heating, and $3,000 for curtains and things like that. So it seemed a logical move that remain, because until the purchase...
Councillor Sturt, this is still questions. We're not at the debating yet. So if you have a question, I know we're all very keen to get into that stage, but I will interrupt anyone. If you have a statement to make, please let me know, but I will. This is just question time. And I'm sorry to stop people's flow. Do you have a question, Councillor Sturt? Otherwise, I'll move on. I'll move on to Councillor Gould, and I'm happy to come back. Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I've got a question to your previous slide to that. When you say you're going from 0.5 to 0.6, does that mean there's going to be more burners available for people to choose? And does that mean the burners will be more cheaper for people to purchase as well?
Yes to the first, unsure to the second. Depends on what burner they select. But they have that larger range of choice, so therefore they can choose the price option. They have a better price range as well as a range of burners.
Are there any further questions on this particular point? Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Then just to clarify, if there's a wider range and selection of burners that do comply with that rule, are they all just pallet burners?
Absolutely not. That includes a whole range, including wood burners. In fact, that's all wood burners in that list.
Those numbers are only wood burners.
Yes, those numbers are only wood burners.
All right, we'll move on to the next point. Thank you.
So the next set of options was to do with the point of sale rule again, and whether or not there's a concern that if it was sold and the vendor removed the wood burner or the non-compliant burner, and then they left it with no heating, then the next person then the purchaser was left with no heating. So we looked at the leaving the rule as drafted, which was still giving the option to remove or replace, and then we looked at option 2B, which was to require replacement, so taking out the remove part of that clause, and then of course that changed the definitions to say that you must replace with, and we listed the 5 best options so that people didn't just put in a plug, so you plug in a fan heater, which is not a great option. So we looked at that option. We kind of got to the point where we thought, well, if someone's going to sell their house down the track and they know they're going to have to replace a burner, they're going to be forced to replace it, they will most likely, if they're going for the cheapest, easiest option, they'll probably just take it out before they even put the house on the market and leave it with no heating. So we thought by leaving it at the point of sale where it is, requiring either, it gives the vendor purchaser the option to negotiate. You know, like if you've got a leaky roof and the purchaser may say, look, can you knock $5,000 off so I can fix the roof? That same kind of negotiation would happen. Now, this rule has been in place for 7 years now. People understand it, they know it. We didn't want to fix it up too much. So we went with option 2A, which was to leave the rule as drafted. And the Working Party endorsed that.
Thank you. I might open for questions on that, if there are any, on that particular option 2A or that point of sale. No?
Thank you. So the final one was to look at the new burner rule, which of course was of considerable concern. Option 3A was to keep the rule as drafted, and we have a text correction to that in the next slide. Option 3B was to remain silent, and 3C was to include a time limit. Now, the reason to remain silent is simply because here is where it starts to conflict with regional rules. Now, the draft regional rules are going to say no new burners except pellet burners. So as soon as the bylaw puts in something different, it is in direct conflict. The community ends up confused, we end up confused. It just wasn't ideal. So, however, with the concern from this council about that new burner, we said, well, if you don't put anything in, and we will do that in the rules, in the same way requiring the removal of existing burners, which is in the regional rules. However, in the third option, we said, well, maybe this council may want to leave something in the bylaw that restricts them, but with a time limit, so that when the regional rules are notified, that then doesn't apply and the regional rules apply instead. However, the best option really still was 3A, to leave it as drafted. And I've already sort of talked about this. The concern with not allowing new burners is that people are left in fuel poverty, unable to heat their homes. Once again, if they don't have the burner, they cannot rely on free firewood. They are always relying on an alternative fuel. So the bylaw is not exacerbating that problem or causing that problem. And there, of course, no change for those with existing burners. This rule still allows them to replace an existing burner. Yes. This is something that other councils have done and did right at the start, and even if they did nothing else, they said no new burners. Basically, it's reducing those sources of new emissions into the airshed. Generally, the higher socioeconomic people are the ones building houses or installing new burners because of the cost, and there's no financial support to do that from us. Every 2 new burners that go in means 1 existing burner needs to be taken out to still achieve the target. Generally, that's going to be affecting your lower socioeconomic community who may be relying on that burner.
We've got a few questions on that, and I have Councillor Kent. Did you have a question on that? Yes, Councillor Kent, then it will be Councillor Gould, then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Why is there no option 3D there to allow compliant burners?
To allow compliant burners is what is currently in the bylaw, and that will continue to allow new burners into the airshed. Even if they're compliant with, even if it's say 0.6, you are still allowing new sources of emissions into the airshed where there wasn't one before. We are trying to remove these emissions rather than add to them.
Then is the recommendation options that have been placed in front of us not incorrect then? Because you're stating that remaining silent automatically restricts to the National Environment Standard. That's not the case, is it?
They remain silent, yes, until the regional rules came in. If we went with that option, which we're not recommending, then new burners will be allowed at 1.5 grams per kilogram for roughly 2 months until the regional rules are notified. It was simply to, it just automatically defaults to what's under the standard. So it's a short-term fix. The regional rules has the long-term fix.
But there is an option for us to permit new burners provided they are compliant, but not necessarily pellet burners. Is it not correct?
There is an option for you to do that. They would be in conflict with the regional rules when they are notified in 2 months' time. Would be, yeah.
So we could do it. It would sit for 2 months before it was superseded by the regional rules. And that's certainly the direction of travel that's been indicated from the Regional Council. So it could cause quite a bit of confusion in the community. Okay, now the next speaker is Councillor Gould, I believe, and then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. With your option 3, you're talking about U-pellet burners, and you're talking before about 0.5 to 0.6. Are you stopping us putting in U-burners into U-builds?
New builds would only be allowed to install pellet burners under option 3A.
It was part of my questioning. That needs to be clearly stated. Because in what you said earlier, I'm now confused on under 3. The current bylaw allows new burners that comply with the 1.5. You're now moving that to 0.6, which I've got no problem with. Sorry?
We'll be moving that to no new burners at all except pellet burners.
Yeah, well, that's...
So there are 2 cases here. New burners, which come in through a new build, or a house with no burner. The second case is replacement, where there's a burner in place and they swap it out.
So let's clarify.
So replacement.
So new build.
Only
thing they can have is a pellet fire or a heat pump.
Correct. Yep.
Or a gas or electric heating.
For replacement.
Carry on. And then you've got the second option, which is I've got an existing fire and I want to put a compliant one under 0.6.
Correct.
I can still do that. So that is not in conflict with the rules, because if it is, that will just create all sorts of regional rules.
Yeah, that is the rule framework. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The new part to this effectively is the new burner ban, should we call it. This has been an identified gap for a long time. This is increasing the problem that we're trying to decrease through this process. So it's that part which has been added in.
Excellent, thank you.
Think of it as a sinking lid on the number of fireplaces. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. My question is for the Regional Council. If there are a number of fires that would comply with the 0.6 limit, why are you only saying pellet fires? Because you're going to achieve exactly the same environmental outcome if it's a compliant fire under 0.6 as if it's a pellet fire under 0.6. And that to me is suppressing commercialism dangerously.
That's not correct. The 0.6 burners still in real life will burn higher than that. They will burn about 4.5 grams per kilogram, probably a bit lower, maybe 3, whereas a pellet burner will burn, is tested at 1.5 grams per kilogram, and in real life will burn at 1.5 grams per kilogram. The important thing to remember here is that our original position was to allow no solid fuel burning at all, and yet we've moved to a submission from this council on the draft regional rules, said we'd really like people to still have a solid fuel burning option, so we said pellet burners are a good compromise to that because of those guaranteed real-life emissions.
In real life, how well have you actually tested this with pellet burners? Because I'm actually a great friend of someone who has extremely good scientific knowledge, who had to make extensive modifications to his newly purchased pellet burner to get it to remotely burn efficiently.
They did real-life testing of pellet burners, and they found they burned almost exactly as they were in the laboratory. So one case is, compared to an actual study, is not accurate.
Thank you. Mayor Chadwick.
Thank you for that clarification, because I understand that was our request anyway. So it's great that you listened to us. Thank you. My only concern, and you answered a bit in the myths and legends at the beginning, was we did hear about surety of supply of pellets and also those burning other bits in their fire. So that's going to have to be still managed, isn't it? Mm.
Yes, it will.
Mm.
Allow another question, Councillor Sturt.
I'm quite happy with where we're heading with option A, but I just wondered whether, under 3, I've got restrict new burners to compliant pellet burners, in brackets, or gas or electric heating. It should also include or heat pumps under the hot swap loan. Or is that just separately, are you removing the option to access those under the hot swap loan? Oh, it's on the sheet we've got, which is different to what you're putting under 3A.
To clarify, yes, we will absolutely still be allowing heat pumps under the hot swap line.
Well,
yes.
I wondered if
or under any scheme.
Yeah, I think that should say that, because because it does give a perception that we're only pumping for pellet fires, and that's what Councillor Kent's observation came about from, was that particular thing there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This table is a summary. It's not an accurate. Detail. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, are there any further slides or any further? Yep. Sorry, continue.
Just wanted to speak about this correction to 3A so that you see what the changes since I put the report in. It's just consistent with the consultation process. The solar fuel burner not used as a space heater. What we did is change it to a positive rather than a double negative, which is what it was. Just overlooked this particular negative statement, so we've just wanted to correct that and just state where 3.2.2 applies. That, of course, is the replacement, allowing a replacement. Yeah.
So I can just comment on this. It was just discovered on the way through because we've been dealing with multiple options, so apologies for not picking this up. It doesn't change the intent and certainly doesn't change what we consulted on.
So when the bylaw comes into effect, we have been working with your staff to work out how we would best introduce that with the smoothest transition possible. So we were thinking that a time frame to a period would grant this and make that opportunity better, because you'll have resource consents or building consent applications already lodged in the middle of the process, and your consenting staff recommended that one of the simplest ways to do this and to transition it smoothly would be just to say a date, and so any applications that go in up until that date just go through as normal and under the existing bylaw rules. So you're still not going to be able to put in a wood burner that doesn't meet the national environmental standards for air quality. It's like the status quo until that date comes in. So we realise that during that period of time there will be wood burners that go in that have a higher emission discharge of 0.6. That's fine, and there will be wood burners going into homes that don't currently have a wood burner. It's just we have to transition it as smoothly as possible, and that is the best way to do it, is to allow a period. It also will help homes that are in the middle of, they might have a contract agreement already out. So it's just trying to deal with those who will be the most impacted by these new decisions, and also thinking of the retailers. They will have stock on hand that needs to be cleared as well. So that's why we thought and are recommending a 2-month period where it just allows the education to be fully ramped up, and letters to go out to all the retailers, etc., out to the real estate agents. It just gives everyone time to make the process of transition more smoothly.
Thank you, and I'm glad that that was something that was worked through with our consenting staff. I think that's come to a very sensible option. Councillor Sturt.
Be a bit more proactive and say the new rules apply from the 1st to the 11th, 17. Be more proactive and say that the new rules apply from 1/11/17, and as you've just finished saying, any current applications that are in the pipeline up till that date can be processed. Just one other question, Madam Chair. I own a house, and I'm going to put it on the market. I've got a wood burner that's 1.5. Am I required at point of sale to remove that under these rules and put a 0.61 in to replace it?
If your fire is compliant
Now,
you do not have to remove that fire under
you.
these rules.
That's got to be clarified, because that's where confusion will occur as well.
Just a question to me on that then. The 2005, I believe, if your burner was pre-2005, then that still applies, and if it's been put in latterly and applies with the National Air Quality and the 1.5, regardless of whether you're selling it. Okay, that's good for the community to know. Yes. Councillor Gould.
Is 2 months enough at 31/10/17? Because I'm thinking about U-builds as well. If people put in a fireplace and they have to change it, a house would take about 3 months to be built.
They would come under the building consent, and what happens is they would lodge the
Presentation, and thank you for the time. I'm not sure how long the working party has been, but I do know it has been a year or two, 12 months at least, and it certainly brought us to a very good place in order for us to address this bylaw. Thank you. Okay, so now's our opportunity to look at the recommendations. And recommendation 2, I am going to keep them.
Order, Madam Chair. I'm getting totally confused here because what's up on the screen totally disagrees with what's actually on the piece of paper in front of me.
I think we'll go through it slowly because it's so complex, and it is very easy for all of us to get confused, that we'll take it one at a time. We'll stick completely to the issue and try not to get sidetracked, and we'll simply vote on them individually. So
Can the wording, I agree with Councillor Kent, can the wording that's in front of us be the basis for the recommendations? Because there's no ambiguity here, no changes, continue to not allow open indoor fires to be used.
we'll have a look at that. I mean,
it says no changes.
No changes.
Allowing, no changes, continue to not allow open indoor fires to be used.
We'll just check some wording on that. One moment, Councillor Sturt.
Because I don't want any ambiguity.
Rosemary, would you mind coming and joining the table there so that we can be very clear on the words, ideally remove any double negatives, and the chart we have that was handed out was really just a guide to help us through it, to see all of them on the one page. So you may find that your agenda is the more correct. So please refer to your agendas. Rosemary, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, councillors, I provided that sheet so that you'd be able to refer to what the current bylaw says against the options, because otherwise it was a very long paper to be able to compare all those in one place. So my apologies, I tried to use language which was, to me, explicit about what it actually meant in practice, but I appreciate that may be even better than the wording in the options. So happy to answer any questions to clarify that.
So essentially option 1A I'm looking actually on page 17, Councillor Sturt. Yeah, we'll look at our recommendations. Is that the committee recommends to council option 1A, which allowing no replacement burners for indoor open fires. Thank you. So Mayor Chadwick, Councillor Donaldson have moved and seconded that. Now I'll open that for discussion. So that is no open fires. That is the no replacement burner for indoor open fires. Does anyone wish to speak to that? All right, and that...
I will speak to it. Because on page 28 under 111, it's more specific. It states, any indoor open fire not permitted under the indoor open fire rule must be rendered inoperable. It's positive. It says that's what, so there's no change to that. That's what that's saying.
So this is what we've had. They were ruled banned since 2015. So any in existence now is either it is illegal, and it's either someone has no idea and it is their only choice of heating, or they are deliberately flouting the law. So this is exactly what we have had. So we're just confirming the status quo. So we've had it moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Just a comment, Madam Chair, it would be useful if each of these recommendations referred to the specific clause of the bylaw that it's addressing. Then that would remove the confusion that we're having here, because we can read bylaws.
I think that's a very good idea, Councillor Donaldson. So we'll make sure we have those references, and I'll announce those as we move on to the next one. When it comes to council, have them aligned. And I think that then anyone looking at this and looking through the bylaw will find it far more easier to navigate the document. I agree. Okay. Read that out, Councillor Sturt. That's recommendation 1, number 3, that the committee recommends to council option 2A, allowing for replacement or removal of non-complying burners. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Oh, yes, moved and seconded, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Sturt, Councillor Gould. So that is, if you have a burner, you can swap it for another burner, just to clarify. Are there any, would anyone like to speak to this? No? Excellent. Okay, in that case, all those in favour say aye. Carried. Excellent.
Because we got the information today from the Regional Council, they're changing it from 1.5 to 0.6. Will that will be included in the bylaw?
Absolutely, okay. That will be included in the bylaw. Yes. Okay, thank you. Number 4. that the committee recommends to Council option 3A, restricting the installation of new burners to pellet burners, and obviously that includes gas, electric heating and the hot swap. Yes, yes, so that's implicit in the bylaw. This is simply the recommendation. It is specifically only a pellet burner that is allowed in this case in a new build. In this recommendation, yes.
That's precisely why I am proposing that the word pellet be removed. If you have a compliant burner that complies with point 6, you should not be forcing a commercial decision on people as to whether they have option A or option B. If they both comply with the same rule, they should have the freedom of choice.
Because you need to move a resolution to that before we have, okay, and have we? Okay, now Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you. So, having been on the working party, having listened to the full explanation from the presenters today, that would introduce the ability to open up more, put more burners into the airshed that in real life produce up to 4.5 kilograms of PM10, because as has been mentioned by the presenters, the studies show that in actual operation, other than a pellet burner, you don't get the level that the appliance is capable of. So you're introducing more emissions, and you're undoing the good work that we've done. So I'm against.
Chadwick?
Certainly against it, because if we need to remind ourselves that we asked that pellet burners be able to be installed in new builds. That was a request from Rotorua Lakes Council. So I will certainly be voting against opening it out to other burners.
Councillor Sturt, you?
We need to refer back to page 34. It says, the second scenario is of a new house being built. In this situation, a ban on new burners restricts the heating options to zero emissions appliances, which eliminate wood as a fuel option. However, these houses are usually being built by the wealthier sector of the community, who can more easily afford alternative fuels such as electricity and gas. The sector does not suffer from the same fuel poverty as lower socioeconomic households, which are covered in other parts of the bylaw. So this is just for new builds. This is only for new builds. Let's get that quite clear. It's not existing property. So I have no problem with 3A as it reads.
As it read in our original, or as has been proposed? Okay. Councillor Donaldson, you may speak again.
Thank you for a second chance, Madam Chair. So this pellet burners was a concession requested by this council, and look, Hastings in their bylaw have outlawed any solid fuel burner in new builds, and they've got through June of this winter with no exceedances whatsoever. Now they have new builds, we're looking here at people who can afford a pellet burner. They have a similar socio-economic demographic to we have down there. So this pellet burners was a concession that this council sought, and so I just add that to the discussion as well.
Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, I'm in favour with the motion I've just seconded, because if a U-build, if it puts in a fireplace at 0.6, we've been told that there is a large number of burners available, and it's up to the house owner or the developer to put in the required specification wood burner. So by going to the chips, sometimes those chips are more expensive than the other source of materials which can be used in the wood burners at 0.6. So really we are disadvantaging you builds and you owners by putting in the pellet burners where, you know, we've heard this morning from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council that the requirement has gone from 0.5 to 0.6 and they've got no objections to that, and they've said that there is more wood burners available, there's more choice available for the landowners. So I can't see why the argument is to keep with pellets, Madam Chair.
Councillor Kent, final word on that, and then I'll put this motion
Thank you, Madam
to
Chair.
the vote.
What I've suggested there does not preclude pellet burners at all. Right? You're perfectly at liberty to continue to put in a pellet burner. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't be, in the bylaw, confining it solely to pellet burners. If other fires are capable of achieving a better efficiency than a pellet burner, why should we exclude them? Technology is moving forward at a very rapid pace. Who knows what's around the corner? To actually turn around and say, we've got to go like with just pellet burners, is like saying sort of in the Industrial Revolution, sorry, we've got to stick with a steam engine, just because it was the best form at that point in time and other forms of energy hadn't been developed. So I believe that in terms of what we should be doing here is we're going for a 0.6 standard. If you've got a fire type that complies with that standard, then you should go with it. Not just say, sorry, you can only have one version of it. So that's why I'm suggesting very strongly that it should actually be widened from just pellet burners. No issues with maintaining the standard at 0.6, and that's what we're going for. But to actually say it's got to be one particular type of fire when there are many others that also achieve that standard, I think is too restricting.
All right, well, if there are no further speakers for or against that motion,
Councillor Kent has raised a very good point, and Dave, you were on the working party. Would you like to comment on what he's just said? Because, I mean, this is really important. It could...
No, I'm going to put the motion because we're going to be debating. We're going to be debating. It's only new builds. Okay, so the motion on the table at the moment is option 3A, restricting the installation of new burners to compliant burners. All those in favour say aye. All those against? No, the noes carry it. So that has failed.
Sorry. The amendment was lost, so I'll move the original as per our schedule.
Point of order, that was not an amendment at all. That was the substantial motion. What is now to be put forward is a replacement for a lost motion.
Yep, okay.
Correct. Councillor Kent, thank you for keeping us on track with that. Now, Councillor Donaldson, would you
So
like to...
I will move a replacement, point 4, to the recommendation, Madam Chair, as originally drafted in the report, that the committee recommends to Council option 3A, restricting the installation of new burners to pellet burners.
Thank you. So we've got a mover and a seconder. Now I'll open that for discussion. Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Well, I think this needs clarifying because I'm now somewhat sympathetic to the fact that the whole goal of this was to reduce the particulates in the air shed. We have allowed existing homes to convert, remove fireplaces completely, we hope. At the point of sale, if you have a non-compliant fire, you have to either put in a compliant one or eliminate it or put in a heat pump, pellet fire, whatever. But if I'm building a house worth $500,000, this amendment or this motion restricts me only to pellet burners if I want a burner of any type in my house. I understand why it specifically says pellet burners. What Councillor Kent is suggesting, you're limiting those people's options, and I tend to agree with him. If the burner complies to the same level as a pellet burner, why restrict the person from having that option. I won't be supporting the motion for that reason.
Who else would like to speak to this? Councillor Donaldson.
Well, as the mover, I'll speak to it, and I'm trying to find the part in the bylaw. It'd be so helpful if the recommendations referred to the specific of the bylaw, but as per the presentation, we're looking at significant growth in new housing in Rotorua. We're looking at a housing accord to enable that. And if we open it up to more burners in each of those new builds, I'd be quite comfortable with no burners, as Hastings have done, as was originally proposed. But at a concession to the request of this council, Regional Council, the Working Party have agreed we go with pellet burners because in real life operation they stick to what they are rated at in terms of emissions. If you go to 0.6 other types of solid fuel burners, people operate them differently, and they can, as has been ascertained with numerous surveys, produce up to 4.5 kilograms of emissions, of PM10 emissions. So way above the 0.6. So we're just adding it to the problem. We're putting more burners into the airshed with all of these new bills that are proposed and that we're enabling through housing accords and other, consenting more subdivisions. So we're just going to exacerbate the problem that we're trying to cure with the bylaw and with the air rule, and I just think it doesn't make sense. So, that's why I support pellet burners only.
Thank you. It is on page 33, part of the bylaw number 6.3. Councillor Kent and then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to challenge something that Councillor Donaldson just said. The issue to me is this. If a fire is rated at below 0.6, it is rated at below 0.6, not what you think it might be in reality because someone's done a test. Either you've got a standard or you haven't got a standard. Either it's got a rating or it hasn't got a rating. The fact that you think the rating's wrong is immaterial. We should be going with a policy which states burners under 0.6 are okay. Now, if there is an issue with a burner that's not achieving that and it's rated at 0.6, that's not for this bylaw to determine. That's for the manufacturers and those who are enforcing the rules to follow up. We should be setting the standard here at 0.6, not trying to determine what it looks like, how ugly it is, and I have to say that pellet fires are the most ugly fires I've ever seen in my entire life. And I have to say, on my own experience, and after detailed discussions with someone who's had to modify a brand new compliant one to remotely to get it to burn properly, that they're not half what they're cracked up to be. So why should we be restricting it this direction?
You now, Councillor Sturt, I think you had one final comment to... Oh, and excellent, Mrs Trumper. You can follow Councillor Sturt.
I think in listening and reading further on page 33, I think it actually details why we should be supporting that 3A, because it's quite specific. It said the installation of any solid fuel burner, coal burner, multi-fuel burner is not permitted. End of story. 3.22, where the installation is of a wood burner that replaced a coal burner, multi-fuel burner, or a wood burner used primarily as a space heater in a dwelling, house or building, the wood burner must have an emission rate of 0.6, as was stated earlier in the presentation. And then the next line is the most crucial for me. The intention is for the regional rules to ban new burners. So if we didn't put the pellet burners back in, it would be in conflict with the regional rules. So it says except pellet burners and restrict replacement burners to low emission burners. So it tidies it up for me in terms of a clear direction. If you want a new build, the only type of fire you can have is a pellet fire, but it doesn't preclude you from having heat pumps. The other one that Councillor Bentley talked about, underfloor heating or whatever. So I think it's quite specific now. I'm more than happy to support 3A. Sorry to change my mind, but it's been... The information's come to light.
And it's a complex area, and it does take some thinking through. Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose, in fairness to Rob, I also agree with the new fires that are coming onto the market. Technology is changing, and I mean, one of the presenters said herself that technology is changing, and I think that we need to be realistic in Rotorua. Pellet fires are an expensive part of operating. I know heat pumps are also extremely expensive, not in newer homes with fully insulated double glazing, and you know, people that are living in there can actually afford to run the heat pump. And I actually supported Rob's motion to stick to compliant burners because I think technology will actually make them efficient. And I know that I'm new and I wasn't around when council actually asked for pellet burners, and I've read this backwards, and I am slightly annoyed that they are compelling people to be one type when we have wood freely available in Rotorua, maybe not free, but you know, they have to buy it, and actually wood for your fire is actually a lot cheaper than buying pellets for a season.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Chadwick.
Look, I actually can see experts behind us squirming. And it's because you have a working party that pulls the very best experts in. We won a major concession to get pellet burners. It was nothing. New build, you had to go to heat pumps or underfloor heating or solar or your choice, or nothing. We've won a concession, which I think on behalf of our community is a really good option that they have taken up. I think the experts are the ones that I would rather listen to here. And when I'm not an expert about whether a wood pellet burner is better than one of the ultra emissions low burners that we were waiting desperately for Christchurch to come up with. And I remember when they brought them in as a trial and we thought, yay, this will be the next, as you say, Shirley, the next technology that we can all celebrate. Actually, they haven't proven to be that effective, and that's what the experts have told us. So we've inched in a concession here, and I'm going along with that because that is the advice from the experts on the working party.
Yes, Mrs. Trumper.
Sorry, then I just really need clarification on the airshed boundaries, I suppose, because that's something that I'm not aware of, obviously.
Without showing you a map, basically it's all of the city, not Ngongataha, and not as far out as the airport. So essentially it's the caldera. So you could take it from Kawaha Point right up to Pukehangi. We do have a map we could show you, but it is only the city. Oh, there we go. A map's being provided for you. Okay, now, were there any other speakers? No. In that case, I'll let Councillor Donaldson have the last say as the mover of the motion, but I would like to just add my 2 cents in here. I understand the sentiment to wish people to have choice in a new build. I totally get that. And for me, the biggest driver, even understanding that, is getting our airshed cleaned up. So when we have got a clean airshed, when we have no exceedances, when we are hitting that red line, which I may well be by the time the next bylaw comes into place, that is the time to consider the new technology, in my opinion. Yes, there's new technology coming out every day, and yes, our bylaws are slow by comparison to update that. However, we can update a bylaw whenever we choose within a time period. We could do it in 3 years if we felt that there was enough information to do so. But for me, the overriding issue is that we have exceedances. I want to see a sinking lid of the number of burners in the catchment, because it has been shown that that has caused the clean-up of our air thus far. And until we have that clean air and meet those requirements, then I'm going to support it limiting a new build to a pellet burner. There are so many options for heating your homes, with the gas look-alike fires and things like that, with the radiant heat that Councillor Bentley has spoken of. And I believe we will, in the future, have some geothermal heating to offer as an alternate. None of those cause our air quality to continue to deteriorate. And for me to add a further firebox in a new build seems one step forward and 2 steps backwards, and therefore I cannot support it. Now I'm going to let the final word go to Councillor Donaldson. Thank you.
Thank you for a right of reply, Madam Chair. Can I just...
just one moment. Councillor, I'll allow a question, and I'll allow a question, and then I'll allow you to sum up.
I think it's important that whilst we have the experts from the Regional Council here, and you have just finished outlining where the airshed is, why are the people of Nongataha being charged $37.50 for an air quality charge when they're outside the airshed and do not have to comply with the Air Quality Bylaw? I think this is a question that the people of Nongataha have asked me several times, and I think it needs to be answered why they're paying for something they're not actually getting.
Yes, would you like to respond to that first, and then I'll let Councillor Kent
So
have a question.
it's not only the people of Nongataha, it's everyone in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council part of our district pays the targeted rate for the air quality clean-up. And I guess it's because we all benefit. A lot of them come to work in town, they send their kids to school in the urban airshed, and so it's a district-wide benefit. So that's I guess, why the targeted rate is paid across everybody.
Yeah, I don't want to debate across the table, but the reality is people of Nongataha wouldn't mind paying $37.50 a year, but they can't access the hot swap loan, and that's the issue.
And that's an issue we can bring up at further time. Now, final comment or question from you, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is one, the statement was made earlier that we have to implement this bylaw because the other one's expiring. I can't find any expiry date in this proposed bylaw, so can we have clarification, please?
Rosemary's going to answer that. Thank you.
Sorry, under the Local Government Act, we are required to review all bylaws. I think it's 5 years, and they can go out to this total of 7 years. For us to be undertaking that review in the last 2 years. They can be reviewed at an earlier point than that if we want to, but that's the maximum 7 years, and we're getting to that maximum 7 years within the next couple of weeks.
But the law says review. It doesn't say they expire.
Yes, they do expire. If we don't renew it, it expires.
Thank you for that clarification. Now, final words, Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly responding to Councillor Kent's response to me, I wasn't challenging the rating of the ultra-low emission burners. It's the actual operator error that creeps in. And on the Working Party, we had the benefit of Housing New Zealand, one of the biggest landlords in the district, who told us that they are taking them out left, right and centre because people don't put the appropriate fuel in them, and that everything, including disposable nappies, goes in them and gets burnt. And so you can see why in the wrong hands, or when it's convenient, people will burn anything in them, and they don't perform at their rated level. Also, the point raised by Mrs. Trumper about heat pumps being expensive. Unless you're getting your wood fuel free, then all the surveys show, and the Consumer New Zealand show, that an insulated house heated by heat pumps is cheaper than solid fuel. So it's the cheapest option.
Thank you. On that note, I'm going to put the motion that option 3A, restricting that the committee recommends to council option 3A, restricting the installation of new burners to pellet burners. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mayor Chadwick. All those in favour, just say aye, raise your hand. Just. Yep. Those against? I think the motion is carried. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Kemp would like his vote recorded against. Okay, excellent. Now that brings us to the end of. Oh, I beg your pardon. Now we've got a couple of other additions that we wanted. One was the dispensation. So the new recommendations, number 5, that the committee recommends to council that a general dispensation is provided under Rotorua Air Quality Control Bylaw 2017 for the installation of solid fuel burners having an emission rate greater than 0.6 grams per kilogram, clause 3.2.2, and installation of new burners, clause 3.2.1, until the 31st of October 2017. May I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Kent. Any discussion on that? Mrs. Trumper.
Sorry, on page 35, it's actually got 31st of December 2017, and I just wonder why they have brought it forward by 2 months.
That's correct. I'll just seek some clarification of which one is correct. Yes. Okay, thank you for clarifying. So just for those who couldn't hear, the date on page 35 in our agendas, the 31st December, is related to another option and is incorrect. The correct date is, as said, on the 31st of October. So if there's no further comment, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And the recommendation number 6, that the committee recommends to council to adopt the Rotorua Air Quality Control Bylaw 2017, incorporating the above decisions effective 1st of November 2017. Thank you. Mover Councillor Sturt, seconder Councillor Gould. Yes, Rosemary.
Sorry, could I, given the above dispensation noted, just having the date effective 1 November effectively makes the bylaw not effective till the 1st of November, so it would have expired. I believe with the above resolution, you don't actually need a date. The bylaw will be effective as of the date. Okay,
so with the mover and seconder happy for the date to be removed. Thank you. Thank you for that timely correction there, Rosemary. Become effective, exactly. Is there any discussion on that? We're just waiting for final wordsmithing here. No, I think that still reads. Yeah, we're adopting it. Okay, so yes, Marianne, you just have one comment. Can you use the microphone, because we do need that recorded? We'll clarify technical issue before we vote on this.
So just quickly, there's 2 things going on here. One is the bylaw as currently drafted is adopted at the point the council basically adopts it, and then there's a 2-month or dispensation up to 31st of October for those 2 specific points. If you make it effective as of 1st of November, all the other parts of the bylaw are not active. So the point of sale rule wouldn't be active until that point. So the dispensation is just for those 2 points.
Six is okay. Yes, as it is. Yes.
As it is, that's perfectly correct.
Yes, yes.
Yep. The words effective as of 1st of November just
cause us a problem. Okay, so we're happy with that the committee recommends to Council to adopt the Rotorua Air Quality Control Bylaw 2017, incorporating the above decisions. Excellent, thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Excellent. Now, I just had one question. Councillor Bentley, did you want to add something about some geothermal? I know Mayor Chadwick, just really more a note, a letter. Would you like to speak to that? Because I do know it's something that you are passionate about.
Yes, so I think that, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we must issue a letter on behalf of this council to Councillor Thurston's group, requesting that they thoroughly investigate it, in that just of late I've been given an awful lot of, to me, new knowledge with regard to the geothermal asset of Rotorua, and it's come from people that are very, very closely linked with exploring these things, and the knowledge that the regional council seems to have come up with, that it's disregarding the use of geothermal purely on their figures, and that they say it's just exponentially expensive, when in actual fact the information I've had just recently is that it's the exact opposite. It is incredibly cheap if you want to get serious about the whole thing and go for it. And with the government's announcement that there may be funding put in place to investigate it, I think we've got to be right up there in front and demanding that we be considered amongst these things. So yes, a letter to Regional Council requesting a thorough investigation is required.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Councillor Donaldson, just on that.
Yeah, and just jumping ahead 24 hours, Madam Chair, just like to indicate that I'll be nominating Councillor Bentley for the replacement for Mr McLaughlin on the Geothermal Working Party for his sins and for his passion.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor Chadwick. I will let you have a final word on this. Councillor Bentley, we're just typing up your request here. So that's that a letter be sent to Bay of Plenty Regional Council requesting that geothermal heating options be again explored and a report be brought back to Rotorua Lakes Council.
No, again, be explored as a priority in a report. Okay, a priority must be in there because they've explored it in the past, and it's given us
As a priority, yes. Mayor Chadwick.
It was a subtlety, and it was in our first term of this council that we tried to push that this be considered by Regional Council, and it was more than just heating options, it was distributive heating schemes, and what came back was that it's too expensive to do district-wide, and we never asked for district-wide. So I think that letter would cover off our frustration that it was just dropped. And the difficulty is in a geothermal working party, and I'm glad Councillor Bentley's going to be there with his enthusiasm, is the focus always goes on to Wairakei and to Kawerau. And they forget the type of geothermal that we've got here, which is absolutely perfect for re-injection and small distributive heating schemes. So we could be a little bit more specific, but I think that covers it.
Just going to, thank you, Mayor Chadwick, allow JP to read something out that will actually just flesh out not only the press release we've had from Simon Bridges, but also a bit of background to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, as you see, you've got the press release and obviously the story that's been run about the geothermal funding that's just come through. I've just had the email through this morning from the geothermal from the Bay of Connections as well, and I'll just read a couple of paragraphs out of it which give you some context, which was the geothermal action stream received a boost this week with the government announcing $150,000 towards the establishment of a geothermal business development lead. The Bay of Connections sought funding from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment to co-invest with local government and industry on the new position to deliver on the Te Toi Moana Economic Geothermal Action Plan. The new role will be responsible for delivering specific actions from the plan, with the main objective of stimulating demand for geothermal heat resources. A key purpose of the new role is to promote awareness within both domestic and international heat users of the value proposition and commercial opportunities presented by geothermal energy in the wider Bay of Plenty. So that's just out of the Bay of Connections newsletter that's come through today.
So, pardon the pun, but it is a really hot topic, and we will be working with our regional council as partners on this going forward. So, Councillor Bentley, one final word before we move on.
I just wish to move number 7, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering whether that letter should actually refer to the very excellent submission we received from Hannah MacDonald, which is submission number 15 on the subject.
I think they're certainly included in on the issues raised. Yeah, I think that's canvassed and it's in the bulk of our agenda. Okay. Well, on that note, there's no further recommendations. Oh, yes, that would be a good idea to vote on. I beg your pardon, Councillor Bentley. We have that a letter be sent to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council requesting the geothermal heating options be again explored as a priority and a report be brought back to Rotorua Lakes Council, moved by Councillor Bentley, seconded by Mayor Chadwick. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Well done. So that's
I'll move we go into confidential, Madam Chair.
Yes, we have a resolution to go into public excluded. I'll just bid our Regional Council contingency farewell and thank you very much. We very much appreciated that you turned out in force today. We do acknowledge that it's a significant bylaw we have passed and we do really appreciate our strong working relationship in this area. And we look forward to a similar outcome with our geothermal in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Right, I have a resolution to go into public excluded. And there is one item for consideration in the public excluded session, and that's Plan Change 10 Next Steps. And the reason we are going into public excluded are to maintain legal professional privilege, to protect information where the making available would be likely to prejudice the supply of similar information or information from the same source, and it is in the public interest that such information should continue to be supplied. To enable any local authority holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, and to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or improper advantage. May I have a mover and a seconder? I've got the mover and seconder, Donaldson and Sturt. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Carried.